Amazing. Thank you so much. Everyone could hear me, right? Perfect. I'll try to be super energetic so that I can liven up the crowd. But I am Andrew. I am the moderator today. I am the co-founder and CPO of Last Mile AI. Previously, I've worked at companies like Meta, Airbnb, and Microsoft, and I'm joined by a fantastic crew to talk a little bit about AI governance and responsible AI. And so first, I'd like to introduce Yulin, who is the CPO from Onfida. Amazing. Second, I'll introduce Wouter, who is from Colibra. He is a Senior Director of Product Management. And then I'd like to introduce Kanika, who's a Senior Research Scientist from Meta. Amazing. Now to get started, we'll actually do a quick round of intros for the panelists to kind of share more of their background and talk a little bit more about what they do. So you can start off, Yulin.
Hi everyone, I'm Yulin Lee. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Onfido. So you can tell from my accent, I'm based in London. Onfido is an identity verification software company. We have been around for about 11 years and use predominantly computer vision as part of our fraud detection and identity verification software. We have we have our development team all around Europe, but we also have a commercial presence in the US as well. Nice to meet you all.
Yes, Wouter Meertes. I'm from Belgium. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Colibra. Already 5 years at Colibra. I'm responsible for our privacy, our security, and now our AI governance offering. Colibra, company coming from a data governance background. So for us, it is really an extension of what we have been doing for the last 14 years. And as data is so important in AI, we think we have a very strong presence in the AI governance space.
Hi everyone, I'm Kanika. I'm a research scientist at Meta. I work in the conversational AI team for smart glasses. I have experience in building models for content moderation at Meta, and even for chatbots, we try to make them more safer and more responsible. Before that, I had experience in academia building user behavior models which are interpretable and they can find credible users online. So yeah, happy to be here.
Amazing. And so to kick things off, we'd love to talk a little bit about what role AI is currently playing within products. And I think it'd be great to start off with you, Kanika. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that AI plays in current products that you're working in, and maybe even broadly on how Meta thinks about AI?
Sure. I think AI plays a major role in a lot of products which Facebook works on. So first of all, I'll start with the content moderation team I was on. We were building models which can proactively detect harmful content. So there we were essentially kind of manifesting or looking at the policies which Meta came up with subject matter experts and trying to build models which can execute them on scale. Then going on to the conversational team I am currently in, we are building models which can seamlessly interact with users. So again, we are building NLP and LLM-powered tools. And because Meta products actually interact with billions of users, it's very imperative to make these models responsible and fair, and that's what Meta has really taken responsibility in. So for the content moderation, I said that was making sure that the recommendations they are showing to users is safer. And also for in the LLM space, we are making sure that we are red teaming the LLMs, which we are training. And we have safety filters to make sure that any malicious prompts by the users are filtered out. So yeah, these are some of the examples, I would say.
Yeah, Thank you. One thing that you just mentioned was Facebook is, used by billions of users. How do you even wrap your mind around responsible AI when it touches so many people? I think you've talked about some of the day-to-day. I would love to kind of double-click into what are the things when, on a kind of day-to-day basis, as you're thinking about these problems that you have to think about because it's reaching so many people.
Yeah, I guess we definitely have a more whenever we were building any product, there is a separate entity of responsible AI, where we come up with which comes up with metrics where we have to make sure that the models we build are actually very fair. For example, I would give you that as Facebook is used in many countries, and most of the AI models currently have good performance for only English languages. So even predominantly non-English languages, content moderation was not at a higher performance. So we make sure that the models we build are trained for those languages. Then similarly, whenever we do any A/B testing in any recommendation models we put out, we make sure that it's not changing or regressing the performance on different locales, because different locales have different cultural nuances. So it might change the distribution for some locales versus other. And similarly, looking at different age groups, how the responses are changing. So there are multiple checks in place where whenever we're building or shipping those products, we have to make sure that they are fulfilled.
Makes sense. Shifting to you, Yulin, Onfida has a AI-powered digital identity solution, which is directly into, I guess, what people consider the most personal thing about them, which is their identity, and AI powers that. I'm curious, directly being in the line with AI, managing that with an AI governance and responsibility, how does that play a role in your business?
Yeah, great question. So we are a B2B business, and our customers do use our products to decide on who gets to access services or who is potentially a fraudulent actor. So it is incredibly critical. And so for us, AI governance covers multiple different things. The first is around, of course, inclusion, because you can't just, if you are the part of the gates that allows people in to actually access everyday services, then clearly you need to be as inclusive as possible within the constraints of digital identity. And hence when we actually work very closely with the the ICO, for example, in the UK, where we actually tested our models for demographic bias, and then we've actually published on this, and it's something now we keep track of, and I think we're probably the most transparent in our industry about our false rejection rates by different demographic factors, which is what we're currently using. But then also beyond that, there's a big element of accessibility as well, because there's very much how your models perform when we actually receive the data. But given that we are in SDKs in our customers' apps and so on, then you can have a great outcome, but that's because so many people couldn't actually complete the flow, which would really defeat the purpose as well. So we also work closely to the WCAG guidelines for all our products. When we design products, it's a really delicate balance between you can have no fraud if you let no one in. You can have great results if you only cream the bits that you want. And so our product development teams in that way are very cross-functional. So we have user researchers, designers, product managers, applied scientists, developers in one team to really try and balance that through so that you can have great, the great fraud prevention results, but also a really good user experience. And in the world of something like biometrics, it means that really choosing very simple interfaces, because if you want people to do lots of really complicated things with their face, then a lot of people will probably drop off. But balancing that with great detection. The third really important angle for us is around data. So coming from Europe, especially, we've had to, very gladly, done a lot of investment in our data platform as part of GDPR anyway, which is something that exists there. And being one is protecting the data, but two, within that framework, there's the concept of deletion and we've invested a lot in our platform so that we can programmatically delete data as it propagates throughout the platform, which are all kind of investments we've made over the years, which now looks like regulation is moving in that direction as well.
Great. You mentioned something about the platform side. I'd love to have this question for Wouter, who's worked on a lot of these platforms, and oftentimes for responsible AI and AI governance, a lot of the tools and the interface on how to enforce it seems to be at the platform layer and the systems layer. I'm curious from your perspective, how do you actually build this into the system? How do you build it into the platform and services so that they can be enforced and how they can have the right safeguards in place?
We typically do that bit with our workflows. So basically, you have multiple services, often combining into a grander customer-facing service. And what we do is we build typically very high levels of automation, starting from data, but all the way going to the model itself, perhaps. And for me, a model is really the logic. I make a very clear distinction between the data that you feed, be it inference or training, and the model there itself. But we have very, very high-level workflows. They come from a data governance aspect. And in that sense, a lot of those workflows are even quite manual in the sense that there is a human processing, reviewing, approving, going to those typical gates. What we see with AI is that we can do a lot more of automation there, but you still want to have those deliberate and very clear markers on where you want to have human oversight. Whether or not you do it is something else, but at least that moment is there where somebody should review whatever is happening there. And this could be, indeed, at the platform level, you could have, it's the smartest way to do it, really there where you have the full context and the full step completed. So for instance, a typical step in a model development lifecycle would be like, okay, I got to build this. You make your project, you think about what you want to do. And typically what first thing happens is that a data scientist starts to bring his first version of the model together and is looking for a data set. And at that moment, that will be already a first marker where you would have this human oversight point where you would say, are you selecting the correct data set? Do you know what is in that data? Do you know if you can use it? Do you know if you have the necessary business consequences completely figured out? Is there a contract talking about Europe? Here in the US, you cannot use the data from Europe just like that in the US. You have all these kind of things that you have to worry about. And I don't think a data scientist or somebody who's working as a developer there really understand that. So probably there are certain steps in place there where you get to the point of, can I or can I not? And we typically recommend to go really, really early with this before you spend training cycles of investments and so many compute cycles on retraining or training your model to figure out, oh no, I should not have used that data set, cannot pull it out, so this is a sunk cost and I need to move on with something else.
I'm curious from Vida and Meta, does this resonate in kind of building it into the systems? And can you talk a little bit about how maybe your first Yulin on how the system plays a role in kind of governance as well?
Yeah, I think we also do have to do it on the platform level. For us, a key part is about consent with the end user, and then also consent with our customer, who is a business, on like data retention policies, what data can be used, can we use the fraudulent data or O data, where does the data need to stay, if at all. It depends on which customers are. And this, we have like 1,000 odd customers. This is hugely complex. It's not possible for this to be done at the team level, because it needs to be done in a way that they can actually only access the data they can train on. I think otherwise it will be way too complex. So we do it at the sort of platform config level, and then the team only accesses what they can access.
Yeah, I think similar checks are in place with Meta. So we made sure that all the user data is anonymized. We need prior approval to make sure that we are using user data in a way that it's safe and we can't deploy any, or we can't release any models which are trained on user data to the public. There are also data retention policies, like 90 days. You cannot download data on local device. Then we also have like a third-party set of regulators who regularly audit our models and our data policies. So, yeah, I think we do follow at least the industry standards and beyond to make sure our users' privacy and data are handled properly.
Amazing. Yulin, at the beginning, you actually mentioned something that was really interesting, which was a big emphasis on transparency. And you mentioned publishing different reports, and transparency is key. Can you talk a little bit more about why transparency is so important for responsible AI and AI governance?
Emily, I think there's multiple angles of looking at it. I think one is just as this industry matures, right? It will probably go to a set of standards, as many other industries, and also, especially on the enterprise or government level, even if they don't fully just follow whatever third-party standards were, they will have their own set of, like, we call it enterprise readiness, but fundamentally it's like enterprise readiness for AI. I think this actually forms a big core part of it, right? Because they're the people, I think 80% of our clients are regulated in some way. So they are, any moment can be the regulator can call them up and ask them all of these different questions. And I think without this transparency, there's, you're just not going to sell any product, actually, because your customers demand that level now because their regulators or someone else will demand that level. And I think that will propagate throughout. The other bit is, of course, like and this is one of the reasons we actually worked with the Data Protection Agency and the ICO, is that if you don't measure it, you don't know it, right? And I think that's the story of a lot of different things. And we hadn't actually measured it properly up until that point. And part of it is to do with also the consent of data and reusing that and so on. And that seemed like the perfect opportunity too. And then once you lift the lid, it's actually not so scary at all. But I think that step, at least from what I've seen in our industry, that step is very hard. Once you've crossed that step, then you're like, okay, this is what it was. This is now, I'm keeping track of my models. I track my model drift. I can report that up. But doing that is what I think people are quite scared of. But if you don't do that, I think you'll find it hard to be in business.
First off, I would say Meta released something called Purple Llama. This ties in really well with transparency and Meta's thoughts on how it needs more kind of safeguards. And so we would love to know more about this massive release that happened, I think yesterday, right? 2 days ago?
Today, I think.
Today? Oh, wow. Okay. So very recent. Yeah. Kind of if you could talk more about that.
Yeah. So I would say at Meta, we always value transparency, and that's why Meta decided to open source their LLM, that's the Llama 2 model. So in that vein, we have the Purple Llama initiative, which actually comes up with the tools and metrics to measure the LLM's inputs and outputs, specifically to make sure that the generations cannot be used for cyber attacks. So it checks if you can't just prompt the model to create malicious code and then use that to create a cybersecurity event. So it contains a little other more safeguards and tools in place to make sure that the prompt you're giving for LLMs are safer and the outputs are also follow certain principles. And it's an open source. So we invite all the researchers and industry and technical people involved in the area to come up to look at the tools and the metrics we have used, red team the models, come up with more red team examples. So for people who don't know red teaming, it's people who are training these models to come up with adversarial samples to break the system. So we definitely want more expertise from all the people out there to more robustly test these models. So that this initiative is a part of that.
Amazing. Maybe a slight pivot, but one of the hardest things within responsible AI or AI governance is really navigating the boundaries of what is right and what is wrong. Because I think oftentimes as we were kind of going about this, there's a massive gray area where what is the lines of where, it's irresponsible AI versus responsible AI. A lot of companies are starting to employ, I guess, human decision, different advisory boards who are able to help make this call. Wouter, I'd love to have your take on this. Working with so many industry-leading companies, how do they approach this? How do they blend what should be done through code and what should be done through human intuition and advisory?
So what we tend to see is that it's a risk game. Yeah. It's risk management. For most of the customers, it really is risk management onto where do I want to be on that line of I will accept certain risk, but I don't want to have brand reputation. I will accept certain risk, but I want to be leading or a fast follower into my competitive landscape. And currently what we tend to see is that as AI in most of those Fortune 2000 companies is still innovation kind of like, the risk appetite is pretty high right now, and they kind of stop at the level of I will not publish it externally, kind of like. So I use it internally, I'll validate it internally, but I will not offer it externally yet. What we tend to see is that actually the investment strategy is the reason why they start pulling more to the left. So they start to realize that they have a solution, they have an attractive AI, and they realize that it might be risky from a responsibility, ethical bias point of view, which could damage their reputation if it would go out. But they also start to realize right now that they have spent already so many cycles of investment on it that it becomes this really pivotal point on if I don't publish, I need to write it off completely. And so what we tend to see now is that people start asking those questions about responsible AI really early in the use case or in the project of lifecycle. Will this be, and if I need to define what is responsible or not, I will actually upfront decide I need to have that kind of accuracy, I need to have those kind of measurements when it comes to buy-ins or to drift or to hallucinations, which you can validate with a red team or with RAG or with any kind of solution that is already in place. And I will upfront put my KPIs up there. If I don't meet them, no go. If I do meet them, yes, it's good to go. And I think that's really smart because then you can start learning on those KPIs. You can start defining for your own organization, and we tend to see that they're having serious discussions about those KPIs onto what I find in my organization to be the perfect KPI to track, the perfect KPI to put a threshold on to say if I need that threshold, then I will go public and I will use it. And it differs. It differs whether or not it's a classic, what I call classic AI, which is with training data, or large language or foundational models, or whether or not it's going to be internal, public-facing, or whether or not there is, for instance, privacy sensitivity involved, yes or no. I mean, there are multiple variables around your project that define which kind of set of KPIs you want to go for before launch.
Yeah, makes sense. Anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that that's my personal opinion. Like these metrics and tools which these industries or companies use, they're more or less dependent or defined by their own expertise or whoever their employees is. But there is still a need to come up with a universal set of tools or a universal set of frameworks which can be useful or by which you can show at least it's agreed upon by all the subject matters. It includes social scientists, policymakers, government agencies. So it's this universal metrics which have to be passed by any product which is launched out there. So I think right now it's very all these metrics are very internal. They're not public. They're very private. People hold on to that information, and I think there's a greater need to have a broader public set of frameworks.
We have time for one final question before we open up to the audience. Wouter, you mentioned something which I wanted to actually talk more about, which was I think you made a quick note about how the classical ML versus now new ML. And I think all of us have been in this space for some time. And so we've seen this shift of what was predictive ML to now the age of generative AI. I would love to get everyone's take on how does responsible AI and AI governance differ for generative AI versus the predictive models? And I think a lot of us, as we're kind of seeing the evolution of AI, and there's a huge focus on generative AI, every booth we see out there probably has something with generative AI now. What does that actually mean for responsible AI, and what are the extra considerations we should think about? Who wants to start off?
I'm happy to. So we've been using generative AI in our systems for a number of years now. Especially, we have this thing called Fraud Lab. It's about like the creation of very high quality physical and digital fraudulent data, so that we can train on it, balance, understand emerging vectors much faster. And that's definitely different, right? This is quite a dangerous data set. That if you think of in our world, like the number of years that governments have put in to be able to create robust ways of doing identity, and actually potentially, you can generate incredibly high quality physical documents, biometrics, like data, like combined identities. This is incredibly dangerous, and it's something that it is a different evidence model, because before we were talking about things like bias and performance and so on, and now this is, well, who can access this? I mean, obviously, we're not going to turn around and sell this in the dark web, but you have to really tightly control this thing, because it's very powerful. And I think that the second aspect is also, especially when it relates to identity, is the concept of identity theft has actually changed quite a lot as well. Like a lot historically, I mean, identity theft has been going on as long as one can imagine, and especially in like US, it's very database heavy. Everyone knows you can get all your data. You can buy data on pretty much anyone you want. But that's that kind of static data. Whereas this now becomes, okay, so actually just having had one picture of your face, I can now, which pretty much everyone has online in some way. This isn't just I know your social security number and your address 2 years ago, which is already somewhat pretty dangerous. This is a whole new level of dangerous, because it's like, well, actually using that one face, I can now use your face and change it in so many different ways, and I can be you on the internet and apply for all these different services. I don't think the regulation is there yet, considering how all of these different things are manifesting. Obviously, I have a very identity-centric view of the world, given that's what we do. But I'm sure you can find different points like this where actually it's not just it's a little bit more, it's actually an order of magnitude more concerning.
Yeah, actually, I totally agree. What changed between classic and generative AI is I think it changed from checking to becoming controlling. In a classic AI world, it was enough just to check. You check your data, you check your output, you could do bias detection. You have formulas for that. With generative AI, the number of, the creativity is much higher. So the number of output could be infinitely different. So the level of controls that are used are different. And to the point we were making earlier, the KPIs that you want to have, it's indeed, everybody just makes them up as they go right now. They balance a little bit their personal risk. I would love to see, the EU Act has already this kind of notion of mid to medium to high risk, but that still stands on a sort of appreciation of it, or interpretation of it. Having measurements there would be really great to go for those controls that really say you need to have that marker on X or Y control surface.
Yeah, I think amazing points. I'll just add 2 points here. So I personally believe in classical AI world, it was more task oriented. So essentially you're predicting, the user will do this activity in the future, or this product should be used by the user. So it's very narrow way of the way the ML output would be seen. So it was difficult to find biases. It was difficult to really pinpoint, or this is the bias the model has been using. Whereas with generative AI, or the applications, either be it text generation or image generation, these biases are actually more, I feel like they're more out there. Like for instance, if you ask an image generation model to create an image of a secretary, so you can see by looking at the results that, oh, probably it's learning some sexist or some regional biases. So I think that's why, and I feel it's more important to work on those detecting and mitigating those risks. Secondly, I feel that there is again a bigger question now: who is responsible for taking care of that these models are safer? Is it the companies who are building these foundational models, or is it the enterprises who are building like applications which are based on their tasks, specific tasks, they're fine-tuning with their own data? So I think that's also another open question which is out there, and people, I guess, are moving around with who is responsible, but that's somewhere we have to answer that question.
Amazing. So I see a couple people are waiting to ask questions, and so I think we could go through a few. I think you came up first. Yeah, if you can ask your question.
Thank you all so much for this robust discussion. Kanika, your role is certainly amazing. You mentioned your previous experience in content moderation. Meta shares that the company invested around $20 billion in teams and tech focused on safety and integrity from 2016 to 2022. At the same time, we see continued headlines around risks such as child safety not being solved for, and that being exacerbated by things like AI. I'd love to just hear your perspective on what's missing in the effectiveness of this investment and what more could Meta do perhaps to mitigate such risks that are, again, just kind of elevated with AI as well. Thank you.
So I would say something which is personally my personal belief, so I don't represent what Meta does and what does not do. I think there is an increased risk for sure for child, because I think when I was this age, I did not have access to a lot of the content out there. But again, I feel like it's an open question. So if you have a search engine out there, and I think any child can also access it, and there is no regulation as such or no expectation with the search engine that if those results should also be monitored. But there is those expectations with social media that a company, whatever it would be, it could be TikTok or Meta or whatever, that those kind of content should be, this is the company's responsibility to moderate those content. I believe it's like it's a harder problem to solve. We have, like as you said, there are lots of resources and collaborations with the external even world to come up with proactive ways to detect harmful content online, or to even come up with, I think Meta has come up with a safer Instagram, like safer login for kids, which are more monitored. But yeah, I don't, it's just, I feel like it's it should be a collective responsibility of the users and also the companies to make this internet safer. I feel like it's an internet problem, not a social media problem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for the enlightening discussion. I 100% support the responsible and ethical aspect of generative AI. But yesterday, I was trying to create an image of Pope Francis, or a cartoon image of Pope Francis, through ChatGPT as well as Microsoft Designer. I did not try Purple Llama yet. I will try that also. It refused and giving me a disclaimer that we don't create living people's images. Fine. I tried another one. There is a poet in Tamil called Thiruvalluvar. It was telling me that I cannot create an image of Thiruvalluvar, who died like 2,000 years ago. The point I am trying to make is that over-restricting these things will lead to black marketing these things. Just like marijuana. If you restrict marijuana is not going away anywhere. but there will be a black market. There will be a cartel will be created to deliver these things illegally. So over restriction will lead to these kind of black markets. It's already there, but we are encouraging those guys by restricting these basic necessary things. That's my opinion.
Yeah, if you want to respond. Yeah.
I can respond to that one because I think it's another argument, but it's an argument more in a commercial space where by being too restrictive, you're actually losing space to companies, competitors that are more willing to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes down to AI. And the balance, and we saw this also with other regulations in the past, and I'm specifically now speaking about security or privacy, where for instance, in the privacy space, GDPR in Europe, companies that were far more aggressive in exposing privacy-sensitive information could offer a better service for people to consume. At the same time, companies that were very restrictive on respecting the privacy aspect, they lost some competitive space. And that only changed when the regulations were out there and the regulations had fines. Then those that were super aggressive have to pay fines, and those that were too conservative knew this is the marker to which I should aim for. So I'm thinking like, while nobody's really that worried about the dark web being so popular, AI is already there. That's where we cannot control it. The fact that indeed having some better regulations out there that have a sort of common playground for everybody is going to help those that are too conservative, and it's going to restrict those that are too aggressive. So there will be an evolution coming in the next 12 months around that, where we don't have to wait for a EU Act to be voted. We don't have to wait for other implementations of the executive order of Biden. There will be a common playground coming where everybody would have that standard of, okay, that's what is acceptable, that is what is not acceptable.
Easy. Yeah, so I'm being signaled that time is up, but if everyone could give a round of applause to our excellent panelists.